Hello, everybody. Welcome to Untether.tv. I'm your host and the founder, Rob Woodbridge. This is that place you come to week after week, month after month, year after year to find out how people are leveraging mobile to do their business, how mobile is extending business, changing the way that we use things. And today, it is all about the automobile. It is about trying to figure out how this industry, the mobile industry, is going to disrupt the automobile industry. No, we're not going to be getting on the smartphones and driving them around, but it is going to save us money. And the way that we're going to do this is data crunching. It's pretty cool here. I'm very excited. I don't know if you can tell, but think about big data and small screens. That's the trend that we're seeing right now. Data that resides up in the cloud, you bring it down to the small screen, and there's nothing better than using that technology or that data to help us get from place A to place B faster, cheaper, and certainly without idling, without using our cars too much, without having to buy a Prius or a bike. This is what I'm talking about: big data in cars and predicting patterns in traffic. There's so much to talk about here, and we're going to look at the impact the mobile is going to have on this kind of stuff, the way that we drive our cars. And with me today, I'm really excited. A company called INRIX, based out of Seattle. It's a 6-year-old company, well-funded 6-year-old company. I'm sitting with Jim Bach, who is the Director of Community Relations at INRIX. Jim, man, thank you for coming on here and doing this. I really appreciate you telling this story about INRIX. Thank you. Welcome.
Great to be here, Rob.
Well, it is a big topic. It is a big opportunity. I use your products right now that are embedded in Navigon. If you own a Ford with the Ford Sync, you're using their product, you're using all this technology. You probably didn't know that. And INRIX is a really cool company. And I was really excited to have these guys on. But I'm actually going to let Jim talk about what INRIX is before we get into this. And he's got a great background. We're going to talk about all this kind of stuff. We're going to dive into some big data stuff. And we're also going to talk about the future and predictive analytics around, predicting what traffic is going to be like when there's a storm, when there's, when it's a sunny day, 2 months down the road. We're going to be talking about that right after I let Jim talk about INRIX. So Jim, can you tell everybody what INRIX is?
Yeah, so basically, quite simply, INRIX is a platform, and what we do is we leverage big data. We crowdsource data from hundreds of different sources. And what we do is we take that information, we apply it to solve transportation issues and to improve personal navigation for folks, whether that's in the car, on their mobile phone, or if you're governments, it helps you better manage and plan and build out your road networks.
It's that simple, isn't it, Jim?
That's one thing about traffic is, doing traffic is not hard, but doing traffic well is very hard. One of the things that, is important and why this concept or this idea we're hearing more and more about big data is so relevant to this space is the biggest challenge you have in doing traffic information really well is latency, right? If the last data point you got about how fast traffic's moving on a road is, 20, 30 minutes old, then that information is not very reliable, right? If it's based on one person's sort of observation that they posted through an app, not necessarily going to be relevant to your experience. So the more data you have, the better, but then you also have to have really good analytics and processing power on top of that data to make sense of it.
Yeah, often people think about traffic as an urban planning issue, as a lane issue, as all these different kinds of things. But it really is. It's not simple because you often get stuck. And we've all been through this where you're stuck on the highway, and of course you have to be somewhere 10 minutes ago, but you're stuck on the highway, and it's inching along, and then for some reason it just opens up. Just like, a kilometer down or a mile down the road, it just opens up. And I'm always left with wondering, like, what happened? Did a butterfly flap its wings 14 hours ago and something happened that changed the structure of traffic? But that's where the way that you guys do it, you crowdsource the data. So it's relevant, it's pertinent, it's up to date, isn't it? How do you do that?
Yeah, so basically our sources of data are primarily the vehicles and devices that are traveling the roads today. So basically anywhere a vehicle goes, any place your mobile device goes as it's traveling with you in the car, it is basically providing us anonymous information about the location of where that source of data is coming from, the direction in which that device is headed, and how fast you're going, right? So we can understand, are you in the eastbound or the westbound lane, or and how fast are you moving? So we could then take that information, and then we do is we run a series of analytics on top of it where we factor in, the traditional, highway road sensor data, but then we also look at things like, hey, I'm in Seattle, right? So is there a Mariners game in town? Are they playing the Red Sox or the Yankees tonight? That means traffic's going to be very different around the stadium. So we're also bringing in information that allows us to do prediction, is not only just provide real-time information, but give folks insight so they can plan ahead so they don't end up in that scenario, like you said, where you're sitting there stuck in traffic going, how did I get here? How do I get out of this?
All right, we're going to get into a little bit more about how INRIX does this and what role Jim plays there. But, I had to bring up your background because you've spent some time at Microsoft in the gaming division, but in the gaming and car simulation division. Talk about that. And then how you transitioned into something like INRIX to apply. I mean, is it game theory that you brought with you? Well, you've got a great background.
Well, what's interesting about that, Rob, is like if you were to ask this question to my mother, which is the classic question, she would say, well, from as long as I can remember when he was a little kid, he had the most Matchbox cars than any other kid. He was always playing with his Tyco racetrack, right? Things like that. No surprise as kids in the car business on some level, he's always loved cars. And that, has become a thread throughout my career. So, I used to do some advanced technology work with Daimler Chrysler back when there was such a company, when there were one happy family together. We worked on fuel cell technology there. I also worked on some of the first announcements around Sirius and XM satellite radio when those were new technologies coming out about a decade or so ago. And then made the move out to the Northwest and was able to parlay my automotive industry experience to start to work with Microsoft's division that was doing the underlying software platform for things like Ford Sync and car infotainment. And then that's how I met our founder and CEO, Brian Mistely, as he was the general manager of that group. We had a great rapport and relationship. And at one point, he decided that he wanted to move on and start his own company. And I wished him the best of luck. I said, hey, wherever you land, let me know. Love to continue to work with you. And about 2 weeks later, he tapped me and he said, hey, Jim, would you be interested? And I said, it's ironic you mentioned this. I just accepted a position to go work at Microsoft to basically go work on the games team around Forza Motorsport and Project Gotham Racing. And he looked at me, being a Microsoft, becoming a Microsoft alumni, and said, "Are you sure you really want to do that?" I was like, "No, I think this is what I want to do. I got to do this." And then about 2 years later, I dropped him a note and I said, "I think I've gotten everything I wanted to get out of this experience. I'm ready for a change. Would love to talk to you." And he's like, "Hey, I think we have an opportunity to be a great fit." Here I am.
Oh, and you've been there for 3 years, right?
So I've been there about 3 years. Yeah. What was interesting, about the Microsoft experience around Forza and PGR and things that we're applying more and more so here at INRIX, and what really sparked my interest in where the company has taken its latest developments is, one thing that Xbox has always done really well is community, right? Gamer score, achievement points, things like that. Community-built maps, being able to create custom maps and worlds within Halo to do multiplayer games, right? So there's this opportunity to take, the 10% of the people who love to paint and tune a car in Forza, for example, and then want to share that with the world for in-game credits and points, and to take that idea and say, well, can we leverage the power of the community of drivers out there every day on the roads to get better information about traffic, which hopefully improves drive time for everybody. And those connections combined with my automotive background was really got me excited to come take the jump.
Well, there is a piece to that, right? Where you look at the perfect scenario about. I always thought about this. I built an application called Chronicle Road. It was way back in the very first device that smartphone that had a GPS. It was like the BlackBerry 7100, way back. It was a brick. It was an ugly phone, but it had a GPS, and it would only take maybe 8 or 9 minutes to triangulate your location, but it had a GPS. And we kept on thinking, practical uses of GPS, like as a networked brain. If there was 1,000 people in my city, or 2,000 people in my city that had this software running at all times in the background, we could get that data that we can gather can do that thing, right? All we need is 5 people in different directions on one highway to understand the speed and the impact of that speed. And I always thought about this from maybe 2001, 2002. there's got to be an easy way to do this. But back then, even GPS wasn't standard. You couldn't get it in your hand, and you could spend a lot of money to get in your car, but it went through an inflection point where I've never seen something like this happen. When GPS hit, it hit and then it was gone, right? Like mobile kind of knocked it out. Is that what you're seeing as well? Is that your experience with working with Microsoft and in the Ford Sync?
Well, that's exactly. I mean, originally, like for INRIX, when they were founded 6 years ago, right? Like people didn't have GPSs in their phones, and they weren't as common in cars. So, the company was founded on this idea: if you can get information from the actual vehicles out there, you could provide better traffic. Well, the only place you could consistently get that back then was through commercial fleet vehicles, right? UPS trucks, FedEx, these long-haul trucking companies. And so that's what the company did, is basically started to create these partnerships and said, if you share us information about location, heading, and speed of your fleet, we'll in turn provide you traffic information back to help you with routing. The beauty of the fleet content that we get from those guys, which is a little bit different than the consumer devices, is those guys are driving 8 hours a day, and they're transmitting data every minute of every hour of the day. So your data set is very robust. Now, you have to run some analytics because you don't want to misperceive a taxi cab stop to do a pickup or a drop off, or a UPS guy doing a pickup as traffic, right? And that's why the volume of data helps. So you have to do things like outlier detection and those types of things to assess for that. But that was really the backbone how the company got started. And now, as everybody has, a GPS device in the palm of their hand, we're now being able to bring more consumer data into the mix. And what's great about that information, what it's allowed us to do, is now extend traffic information beyond like the highways and the major routes and the arterials into these secondary streets, right? Like your local roads in a downtown area, roads that lead up and into your neighborhood, which are typically places the fleets don't go that often. So by having that data, again, we answer kind of that age-old question for folks, when you've been stuck sitting on the highway and you're thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be late. Should I take the next exit? Is it faster? Well, now we could tell you, is it faster, or should you just stay where you're at?
Yeah, unlike me, who just assumes that it's not, that anything's faster than where I am. I would go the 38 kilometers out of my way just so I don't get stuck in traffic. And I think that's the idea. I mean, you guys are talking about this. I read a great book by Stephen Levitt. Everybody's read it. It's called Freakonomics, and it's the way that economists think is very linearly. And what Levitt did was kind of take a different approach to a challenging problem. And what you guys have done is the same thing. Gas is expensive today. I think it's cheaper in the States than it is in Canada. We're at about $1.33 a liter, which is the highest in my lifetime that we've ever seen. When we celebrated dropping below $1.20, we celebrate, but I remember when it was 30 cents a liter. So we're talking about an insane amount, and people are now pushing hybrid cars and public transportation, which I'm all for, and bicycles and physical fitness. But you took this a different approach. Is that, listen, if we can shave off, what is it, 70 hours of idle time a year from your travel, and that's the goal. It's just looking at it a different way. We'll save you a ton of cash, a ton of idle time. We'll save the environment if all of us just do that with your technology. So by offering an alternative route to where I want to get to, so it saves the time and it doesn't allow me to idle. I love that thinking. I just, that's what marvels me about the way that we approach problems, is that you guys are doing it, same problem that everybody's facing, but instead of ditching the car, which is not realistic right now, let's find a way to save you idle time. How did that come about? Is that, that's a big claim, 70 hours?
Well, general consensus in thinking out there is for every hour you spend idle, it burns about a gallon of gas, right? So if you live, I think the average American spends about 34 to 35 hours a year idle in traffic. But like if you live in LA, that's close, or New York, that's closer to 70 hours a year, right? I mean, it's exorbitant. And so the way, we kind of think about this is something as simple as, whether it's our INRIX traffic app, or if you're using Navigon, as you mentioned, that has our traffic information in it. We basically, for folks, until, everyone can wake up and have an electric vehicle or a Prius in their driveway, there's a very simple tool out there that can, basically, I think it's the automotive equivalent of, changing the light bulbs in your home to compact fluorescence, really. because it reduces your fuel consumption, reduces your stress, right? That's
Yes.
one of the worst
Huge.
parts of it. Um, and as you're saving gas, you're also saving money at the pump. And to your point, here in America, in Seattle right now, we're about $4.30 a gallon. The Bay Area is right around there. We're not even to Memorial Day, so I think we're easily going to be at about $5 a gallon by summer. So, when you're driving an SUV with a big tank in it, it's costing you $100 to fill up that tank easily. And here's a great way you could, cut your spend by as much as 30%. I mean, it's pretty significant.
Well, obviously, it's significant enough for you guys because with that pitch, you managed to raise money from some significant guys, but not in the mobile space, not in the software space, but from a green tech perspective. You're telling me that you raised money. How much did you raise, and from whom?
Yeah, so last summer we took an infusion of funding from Kleiner Perkins out of their Clean Tech Fund, which they created, I think, in consultation with Al Gore. And they funded us based on this idea of there's great applications of big data that, like INRIX is doing, that not only have great benefits to individual drivers, but then also help governments as they look to retool our infrastructure, right? How do we make our highways smart, right? How do we better route traffic along our highways? And two, this is not just about cars at the end of the day as well, because if you could better understand where your worst pain points are in your road network, you could best decide where do I put public transit to try to alleviate some of the volume that we have going through these areas. So it's not always roads, but it can be transit as well. So you improve the economy, you have good environmental impact, and then it helps people reduce stress every day, which Lord knows is always a good thing.
Well, that's what I love. I got excited when you talked about this. Is that around big data? I look at this. I've been in the mobile space for far too many years. Very passionate about it, but it is the data that gets me excited about this. I'm also an old a baseball freak. So when I look at statistics, it's the same thing. Is that the way that a pitcher and a team approach a batter? Is the same way that it's big data compressed into that pitcher's mind and the catcher's mind and the manager's mind to make the optimum pitch to execute on what they need to do, which is get this guy out. But not only that, get this guy out in a manner. I want to hit a ground ball to the shortstop to turn a double play. Like it's orchestrated, right? And it's the same thing when we start to think about mobile and the accumulation of big data and the outcome on a small screen that has a massive impact like that, right? It's just it's one small deviation in a route based on all of this data being crunched behind it, and the only outcome is turn left instead of going straight, right? Like at its essence, that's what we're talking about, isn't it?
It's in a sense, I mean, it's to use your baseball analogy, I mean it's Moneyball, but for transportation and personal navigation. That's really what it is.
I love it.
Because think about this from a government standpoint. I think from a government standpoint, the way they get traffic information today is they have to build out this physical network of road sensors along the highways and the interstates. And by taking an alternative approach, particularly now when there are more and more taxed to have resources to do this, and license traffic data from us, they get it for about a quarter of the cost that it would spend them to basically build out these physical road sensor networks. So basically they get better data for a quarter of the cost that allows them to more efficiently apply their resources across their network. So it definitely is that. Personal navigation is another example, right? You think about how much time you spend every day sitting there on your commute. And a lot of people come back and they say, well, I generally know what traffic's like on my commute. What do I really need this for? Well, the thing is, as we find, as Obama's talking about this, there's a $50 billion transportation bill sitting in the ether in Congress that they're going to sort out by the time we have an election in November, hopefully. We're going to start to see more investment in roads, and things are going to become more unpredictable out there as they start to do more construction and start to do these upgrades. The other thing we're seeing too is, about 3 years ago when the economy fell off a cliff, traffic congestion dropped 30% across the country. And we're not even halfway back to bringing employment back to where it was at that time. And we're already starting to see congestion rise on our roads. So as more people are going to be going back to work, they're going to be heading out on the roads to drive to work, and it's going to make traffic worse. So what you see as predictability today is going to continue to be more unpredictable, and that's where we feel we can deliver value, not through real-time information, but probably more so through the predictive work we're doing.
We'll come to that because I want to pick on something that pick up on something that you just talked about with, we're certainly looking for leading indicators, economic leading indicators, right? So, we have the Walmart index for retail, and we certainly have Amazon for digital retail. But one of the great things that you just identified is that, I'm in a high-tech town. Ottawa, Canada is considered one of what we used to be called Silicon Valley North. We had massive startups, and Nortel was based out of here, and certainly QNX and RIM have a huge presence here in Ottawa, and it's a very tech-oriented town. But when the tech boom busted, you saw it right away, right? Traffic was down on the highways. When you would go out to our technology center, which is Canada here, parking lots were empty. And that's how we looked at it and said, oh, you know what? We're still in this recession. And then we started to see, cars filling up the parking lot, and it was a no-brainer. We saw, the rebound happening. And what you just said there, when you're talking about traffic falling by 30% during the recession, it's a leading indicator, isn't it? Maybe a blip on one day, but if you're consistently dropping and then you're consistently moving up, those are key economic indicators about employment and health and health of a city and a nation. Would you look at it that way?
Exactly. We definitely, we're finding more and more uses of our data in that sense. We're actually looking to do something just as you described, is to be able to publish on a monthly basis an indicator based on traffic conditions that gives us a sense of sort of what's the state or the health of our economies and our cities, right? Because what we found too is we look back and we looked at over the last couple of years, the cities that were really hit hardest by the recession. So the Las Vegases, the ones that really were heavy on the real estate market, they're still kind of struggling, right? Traffic is not rebounded in those markets the way they have in other places. Now, places like Detroit, for example, that had over a 30% drop when the recession hit, is now actually climbed back quite healthily as a result of the resurgence of the automotive industry in that sector. As we're seeing some resurgence in manufacturing and in retail, we're seeing those, typical hubs also are seeing increases in traffic, right? So, it definitely is an economic indicator. As we like to say, when, if you're fortunate enough to still have a job through the recession, you don't have a lot of traffic on your commute going to work, but you know what, your 401k and your stock portfolio is probably not doing so good, and vice versa when it's the other way around, right? So the one solace is you sit there in gridlock every day, and you're like, well, the economy's humming, and, my 401k must be on its way back, right? So you could take that solace as you sit there staring out the windshield for a few hours.
It's classic. It is. You know what? Well, at least I'm getting richer, as I sit here.
Exactly. At least the time is money on some level, right? You're losing your precious personal time, but hopefully your portfolio is helping make up for it. But the other thing that we're finding too, Rob, is really interesting. Is we're starting to uncover as we get our data becomes more and more robust and becomes much and much more accurate. Is we're finding that we're getting interest in our data from places that we hadn't really expected. Like so take, for example, we get an inquiry from time to time from hedge funds. These guys are interested in understanding what traffic conditions look like around big retail establishments as they're trying to get an early look at maybe what earnings might look like.
Love it.
Right? So take, like a big box retailer, like a Walmart or a Home Depot. Well, if there's a lot of traffic around the stores, well, they must be selling a lot. They're probably going to have a good quarter, right? So we get a lot of folks coming to us looking at this data for these other types of purposes that, quite frankly, we mostly just got in the business really to try to help people move easier, from place to place, and spend less time, money, and burn less fuel doing it.
See, that's really is so interesting about this technology, because if we bring it back to the essence, which is this mobile play, it's enabling all of this, isn't it? The pervasive nature of mobile technology. Now, I'm not just talking about smartphones, but I'm talking about in-dash operating systems like Ford Sync, or I'm talking about in-dash GPS. Or I'm talking about even something, the equivalent, of an NFC chip or some kind of RFID chip or something like that really does enable this kind of massive mesh network to gauge traffic and congestion. But without all of this technology, you guys can't do this. Mm-hmm. And so, over the last 3 years, you must have seen some insane change. Certainly, the data side alone, right? I think we're just beginning to really understand what this data means in terms of the economy, in terms of everything that we've talked about right now. But over the last 3 years, as GPS has gone from $6,000 or $10,000 in your dash to, $40 on my iPhone, the democratization of these tools has basically enabled it for everybody, including things like Google Maps and including your own application, which you guys offer for free on a cross-platform. Like that change, I don't think is ever heard of. That swift change. So, what has that impact been on you guys for data collection, for the data the big data that you're actually you're crunching, and the outcome of that data?
Yeah, it's really been kind of two major things. So, first off, I'll talk a little bit about automotive, what's changed. So what's changed and we're seeing in automotive is these cars are now becoming connected to the network, right, with a two-way connection, right? So it's not just able to deliver information down to the vehicle, but to be able to get information to come out of the vehicle. That has been a big change. So, for example, take a customer of ours like Ford, right? They traditionally have shipped about 10% or so of their cars have shipped with Ford Sync. In the next 2 years, that'll be probably about 50% of their vehicles, and they're going to start rolling out Sync across their entire product line, right? So that benefits INRIX from the sense when we think about the aggregation of data, and the more data helps our models do a better job of delivering more reliable, accurate information. We're experiencing a network effect just based on them growing and growing and growing out that install base. Mobile phones, right? GPS smartphones. I mean, you go look at the forecast numbers. I mean, they're continuing to grow and grow and go through the roof. And, a lot of these, premium iPhone applications for navigation are offering our traffic. And so organically, regardless of us, winning new customers or new deals with an automaker or a mobile app provider, our network is organically growing through our existing base just by the sake of the more and more technologies coming into these vehicles. And I know, you want to really focus on the mobile phone and the small screen here, Rob, in this discussion. But, what continues to come to mind to me was back in my ABU days, I remember sitting in some early meetings that the company was having with Toyota Motor Company that, unfortunately never produced anything substantial to date as far as what they've done like with Ford. But I remember Mr. Toyota saying in a meeting to Steve Ballmer saying, Steve, my competition is not necessarily the other automakers. My competition is the mobile phone. And I thought that was very telling. I mean, if you think about it, the car is quickly becoming the ultimate mobile device. It's the biggest mobile phone you'll ever have, and it goes faster than anything you've ever owned, right? So it is that bridge, from when you have connectivity on your phone or at home, you get in your car, you want to have that same experience in your car. You want to be able to access your information, and that information should be relevant and useful to you in that environment, right? And that's really what we're trying to enable is, these guys that are selling, still selling fairly expensive navigation systems, embedded navigation systems in cars, they're competing with free on the mobile phone. How do they do that? Well, they're adding value-added services like traffic on top, and then you're seeing the mobile market quickly do the same thing. So it is a bit of there is a bit of this arms race going on to see who will win. The good thing for INRIX is we're agnostic. Either way it goes, we figure we could deliver value to however the customer is going to get that information.
Well, and I look at the impact that mobile's having on our lives as segments of or dashboards, right? We've got our home entertainment dashboard, which is this. We've got our kitchen and our domestic duty dashboard, which is this. And then we've got this dashboard in the car. It's a life dashboard. And you're right. I do want to bring everything with this. And I remember way back in 97, 98, way back, where they talked about Internet World, which was a magazine, talked about a print magazine, talked about internet in a car. What do you think about that? And I thought, man, that is something I would love, provided that you're doing it in safety. And we're getting to that point, right? It's not just about navigation anymore, because navigation is dumb without the layers that we're talking about here. I can't agree. I couldn't agree with you more that this is. I mean, we're in a brave new world here, and we might be a little bit more in front of what the consumer wants. But if anything is going to show us that over the last couple of years, the way that GPS has gone from a need or a want to have to a ho hum, right? These things communicate with satellites, and we're so blasé about it today. And just 3 years ago, we were blown away by it and spending thousands of dollars. So I see the impact coming very, very quickly. One of the things that always comes up in these conversations is privacy, right? Is that
Yes.
when we're talking about, as you said, the ability to broadcast out from the vehicle, now we're talking about privacy issues around, what is happening to that information and how is it being used and how is it being broadcast and so on. So, I mean, can you talk a little bit about the privacy issues? Do you focus on those things, or is that in the hands of who you're providing this data to?
You know, we take privacy very seriously, Rob, as we need to, given the business that we're in. You know, the one thing I always, preface when I start to have this conversation about privacy is, there's one thing that the consumer does have to give us in order to provide them with a service. And that is one piece of personal information we have to know is we have to know where you are. If I don't know where you are, I can't help you find the fastest route to navigate you there, right?
So
and if I don't know where you are, if I don't know where you are, I can't, and know where you're headed, I can't continue to monitor traffic conditions along your route to determine if something happens like an accident. Do I need to alert Rob that there's a faster route to go another way? So there has to be a little bit of give with the get. But that said, what we do is we ask our customers that we source our data from, we ask them to strip all PII as they send that data to us. We have really no interest in that. All we care about
PII?
is
Can you
location.
what's PII? Can you explain that?
Oh, so personally identifiable
Okay.
information. Right? So, like, I don't want to know the device ID if it's a mobile phone.
Gotcha.
I don't need to know the VIN number if it's a car. And basically what we do in order to protect the anonymity of the user is we assign a random hashtag when the data comes off the vehicle or the mobile device that identifies it for the course of that journey, right, of that individual. And then as we use that to continue to sort of recycle that hash, and as we go through the person's trip, that's how we are able to send data back down to them to let them know, hey, there's a better route to take because there's an accident up ahead, or, there's some construction, go this way, or stay on that road. It's still going to be faster than any alternate. So, it's important. We treat privacy, very similar to how the wireless carriers do. We're not looking to make ancillary businesses, right? I'm not trying to navigate you to a Quiznos or a Starbucks or something. We just want to help you get where you're going in the least amount of time possible and using the least amount of gas. And that's all that really matters.
There must be, I mean, I certainly know that Navigon and some other brands and even Ford Sync and the technology there are kind of leveraging your location for that exact thing, right? So here's a Starbucks, here's a Quiznos, here's a bunch of restaurants that you should be interested in based on your social graph, and they complicate it and maybe gum it up a little bit. But you really are just providing that data. You're not the one that's putting that extra service layer on top. I just want to make that very clear. And of course, when it comes to privacy, a company such as yours or most companies will adhere to the requirements that they handle your data with utmost care and concern, right? So I wasn't implying anything else other than that.
No, fair enough. I mean, if you want to navigate to a Quiznos or a Starbucks, we'll tell you the fastest route and how long it's going to take you. But, I have no interest in, presenting coupons to you about, discounts and things like that, or understanding personal, wishes to say, hey, I know you like Quiznos. There's one around the corner, right? That's not of interest to us.
Well, I'm looking forward to the day where it's like, I believe that the impact that mobile is going to have is quite considerable. And I wrote, just a small missive around, when mobile and smartphones become pervasive, it's going to eliminate things like drunk driving. And I start to think about that. And, the impact that something like a location-based or a location-aware module in a mobile device, attached to your credit card or your debit card or anything along those, your payment format, that can kind of take big data, assume a bunch of stuff like, you've bought 4 drinks in the last, 90 minutes. We're not going to allow the ignition of the car to start because of, it's all connected. And I think that, when you start to think of the car as more than just a vehicle from A to B, you start to think about the things that you guys are thinking about, which is, how do you add that service layer on top of just simple data? And that's why Walmart or analysts come to you about Walmart and around parking lots and the impact and how busy those parking lots are. I think we're on the precipice of something pretty incredible. So with that, when you look out to the future, what are you seeing out there that you think that, I'm getting so excited about this coming down? We're nowhere near ready for it, but when that happens, this industry is just going to, become cool. What's going to happen then?
Yeah. Well, what it's starting with today is the quality of this information, the quality of our traffic information gets better and better. And, we found that in some independent tests, we've been found reliable, accurate within 2 miles per hour of actual traffic speeds under all conditions, right? So it's weather events, holidays, you name it, right? Well, what people really want is they don't just want information, right? Like the age-old question, oh, you're going to tell me about traffic when I'm already stuck in it. Or I generally know what traffic's like on my commute. What you really want, you want insight, right? You want to know, hey, if I leave now, how long is it going to take? Oh, I have a meeting at 4 o'clock. What time do I need to leave the office by to get there on time? And what's going to be the best route to take, right? You want those kinds of insights, right? So those are the things we're starting to see more and more and more of, this predictive piece, right? Where we're factoring in like, hey, what's the weather like today? Is it a holiday? Okay, there's a Mariners game tonight. Typically this does this to traffic when there's a 7 o'clock game. We're bringing in predictive algorithms on top to help you plan better in advance, so you don't have to spend all that idle time in traffic, right? Or you don't have to try to make an ad hoc change when you're in the middle of your trip because you may not have the option. And you say, well, geez, that trip, I could have done it a couple hours later than then. I would have avoided all this traffic. I used to live in Chicago 2 blocks from Wrigley Field. And I used to plan my whole life on whether or not there was a baseball game coming in or out that day when I had to go run errands, right? So this is the type of insight we deliver. Where is it going? I think it's going in some really exciting places. One of the things that we're seeing, I'll give you an example, is we're starting to get the automakers coming to us because, again, they're competingly feeling these pressure from what's going on in the mobile device and the fact that the mobile industry just can innovate a whole lot faster than the automotive guys, because the automotive guys are still dealing with 3 years from design to production for a car. And, well, we all know what the mobile cycle is like. It's faster and faster, right? Well, they're saying to us, they're saying, hey, INRIX, what if we allowed you to tap into the CAN bus in the vehicle? So what that is it's the car area network, right? And we'll give you information off the CAN bus about what are the anti-lock brakes doing? How fast are the windshield wipers going? And we have an automaker right now that is giving us that data that we're factoring in with traffic information, our routing algorithms, to not only tell people, hey, what's the fastest route, but what's the best route based on the road conditions out there. So if you live in Canada like yourself, or somewhere in the Midwest where you deal with blizzards and snow, we'll be able to read from vehicles on the road which roads are still icy and potentially not clear and which ones are better routes to take, right? And that's something that the guys on the mobile phone will never be able to have that depth of that kind of data. And so that's where I think we're going to see the auto industry make a little bit of a stronger play coming back against mobile for these embedded systems, even though they're continuing to open up their ecosystem to allow more of this into the car. The other thing, Rob, if you'll let me continue, is this whole idea of the Internet of Things, right? You've heard about this all over the place. Like Evan Hansen at Wired talks about this quite a bit. As all these devices become connected, right? The car is becoming connected, right? Someday your alarm clock is going to become connected, right? So you can imagine a future where your car knows that on a weekday morning, generally you're going to the office, where that address is, and is already monitoring traffic along your route to determine, hey, you know what, do I need to have Jim's alarm clock go off a little bit earlier today because he's got a 9 a.m. meeting and, boy, traffic's really bad. He's going to have to allow some extra time on his commute. Those are the types of scenarios that I think we're going to start to see down the line that start to get very, very interesting, right? There's no reason why when you get in your car in the morning or you open up your nav app on your phone, it should just know that if it's like, 7:30, 8 a.m. on a Monday, that there's a good chance you're going to work that day and you don't have to go request that information. It's already working on your behalf, right? So I think that's some of the exciting possibilities where we could start to see this going.
That is...
And the one thing, too...
Sorry, go ahead.
There's a couple of... sorry to interrupt, but one thing that we hear a lot, too, everybody says, well, if everybody had this software, wouldn't you just be moving traffic jams from one part of the road network to the next? And the answer to that is, with today's technology, yes, that would be the case. But what we're starting to see is these routing algorithms get smarter and smarter, and as they start to understand at a network-wide level what's happening out there, it will know after it routes so many vehicles down a certain path that it should stop doing that because it's just going to cause traffic, right? So when we get smarter and smarter routing on top of all this data that we're getting and aggregating, I think we're going to see some great advancements in transportation management and great improvements in personal navigation, right? It really becomes all about your time is what it comes down to.
That you just open up so much there, and when you start to think about urban planning and feeding that data into something. So the INRIX data goes into the way that cities operate their, stoplights. They're programmed right now based on assumption on traffic and traffic patterns. But you could do real-time programming to avoid traffic jams based on the wireless data that's being fed from the cars into a system like INRIX. So when you're getting that granular, you can control things in real time, couldn't you?
Oh yeah, there's some interesting examples we've had there. So the state of Washington, where I live, is a really good example. They're very progressive here with active traffic management is what they call it. So there's something in transportation parlance that optimal throughput of volumes of cars on a road network is typically at about 45 miles per hour, right? If you want to keep things moving slowly where you don't have these gapers, blocks, and stop and go traffic, right? Well, one thing that they're starting to do is through being able to understand the traffic conditions and how they're building over a course of the afternoon, they start to understanding when they're starting to get to maximum throughput. And so what they'll start to do is further on down the road before that congestion point is they'll start to gradually lower speed limits. And what they do is when they lower those speed limits down, it slows the pace of traffic across the stretch of the road that reduces the onset of traffic congestion. And actually in Seattle, they're able to delay the onset of rush hour by 20 to 30 minutes now by using this model, right? So sometimes you can't always get rid of traffic altogether. I think that would be, we'd all love to have that silver bullet. But if we can reduce and diminish that window of where we all face that grind of gridlock day to day, that's a great, great first step. The other thing we're finding too is these guys start to use crowdsourced data from folks like us, in addition to their road sensor data. Now they've filled the gaps in their road network. So they have this very complete picture of what's going on. And we had an incident about a year ago in the state of New Jersey where they had, our traffic up in their operations center, which you can imagine, these rooms are kind of like NASA mission control rooms. Like that's the best way I could describe it, right? These big screens, lots of data, lots of, traffic cams, all kinds of stuff going on. These guys are sitting there. And they saw an anomaly happen on a stretch of I-95 in the middle of the day when typically there's no traffic. They looked to see if they had an incident report of an accident, right, through an emergency responder or through a broadcaster. They had nothing. And they were like, what's wrong with the INRIX data? There's something weird going on here. We got a big traffic jam according to the flow map. And so they dispatched their closest DOT vehicle. He gets out to the site. Turns out a dump truck it turned over was blocking both lanes eastbound on I-95, heading up into Manhattan. And turns out that DOT truck got there 10 minutes before the first emergency responder did. And the power of that is that the faster you're there, the fastest you're able to clear that accident. And not to mention, the faster you're there in a fatality, you could potentially save a life that way. And so the flow data, like we were even surprised, we're like, wow, our traffic flow information is getting scary good to the point where we could basically predict incidents in a much faster route than these guys have ever been able to do this before. And New Jersey has flat out stated, we think you guys have reduced our user delay costs around incidents by $100,000 an incident. That's, $5, $5. That's a lot of bucks over the course of a month or a year that could be better spent on building out a public transit network or improving the motorways, right? Improving our roads and bridges and our infrastructure that hasn't had a lot of care and feeding since we originally built it back in the 50s and 60s. So it's definitely a big sea change out there, and the proliferation of these mobile devices and the car becoming, in essence, another mobile device on the network is really what's driving it.
And you guys who are watching this, listening to this, thought it was going to be a boring conversation about traffic. All I see around us is an incredible opportunity, entrepreneurial opportunity that is yet to descend on us because we're still trying to figure this out. And it's going to be around distilling the data, understanding what that data is, and then actioning on that data. So what we're talking about here is not only the way that we change our lives, the impact on not only on our pocketbook around gas prices, but also on the maintenance of our automobiles and the longevity of our automobiles, longevity of the streets, then we're also talking about quick response. We're talking about data patterns and modifying data patterns in real time so that we can actually have an impact on our traffic to reduce that even more so that we speed up our time to get from A to B. And that's just the beginning. Now we're talking about all of this enabled by some sort of mobile connection from your car to to the cloud. And then it's about what you guys out there in the mobile space can actually do with that data once it's up in the cloud, and talking to INRIX to be able to build this out. And it just isn't about getting from A to B. It's about getting from A to B efficiently and at the cheapest cost, not only for you, but for the city, for humanity, way up there, way up there. Am I way off on this, Jim?
You're not. I mean, you're not. And, it's interesting. The company was founded on this entire premise of, hey, if we can get data from the vehicles and devices on the roads today, we can improve routing, improve navigation, and help reduce traffic congestion. And as we've gone deeper and deeper into it over the course of time, these issues have emerged, right? I mean, the biggest boom we ever had to our economy in the history of this country is when we built the federal highway system, because it promotes the flow of goods and commerce across the country, right? That really is no different today, right? The more time a trucker sits idle in traffic burning gas, eventually it comes down to the cost of how much you spend on a loaf of bread at a grocery store, right? So we definitely can have an economic impact from that standpoint. And then we also know pollution, right? I mean, cars are one of the biggest polluters, right? And we're all moving towards alternative fuels and alternative powertrain vehicles, and they all have a bright future. I mean, I've worked on fuel cell technology when I was working with Mercedes and Chrysler. I mean, powerful potential once we bring the cost down. Well, until that day comes, there's some simple things people can do every day to help save them time and frustration on the road. So, so we can have an environmental impact, we can have an economic impact, and we could have a personal, individual impact on the quality of our lives by helping you guys stay out of gridlock.
Well, and in doing so, you guys, as we said, you have an iPhone and an Android and a Windows and a BlackBerry app that you're giving away for free, and this is about traffic patterns. You guys have created this, the largest global traffic intelligence platform in the world, and you're giving a conduit away, which is basically an iPhone app for free. They can go and download that at will, can't they?
Yes, they can. It's INRIX Traffic is the name of the app. It's free. It's available on all the app stores. It's coming soon. If you're a Windows 8 junkie and you're trying that out, we're going to have a version for Windows 8 tablets and things like that as well. So we're platform agnostic in that sense. So we work across all the mobile phone platforms. The app is free, like I said. The thing that I think is unique about that app versus some of the other customers we work with who implement our traffic in their navigation, we don't do turn-by-turn navigation in our mobile app. We basically provide you with information that says, hey, Jim, I'm going to give you a general sense of what the fastest route is based on traffic conditions for the places you go every day, so like your home or your work. And the other thing we do in that app, too, is we give you the predictive element as well, where you could see up to 8 hours in advance how traffic conditions are expected to change over time, right? So if you're trying to figure out, hey, what time do I need to leave for the airport to get there on time because my flight's at 9, I'm going to be going in the middle of rush hour, we can give you a really good sense of when you need to get out of the house to avoid some stress on your way out of town.
So cool. So I'd implore you to go and play around with that. And if you have or you're going to, reach out to me at untether@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your comments, and I'm sure that Jim would as well. But this is the kind of stuff that really where you start to see it's beyond the app. It's beyond mobile, really. It transcends it. It's enabled by mobile, but this is what we're talking about. Malik talks about it all the time around big data and small screens. And big data is huge, but it's got to come down to a point where we can understand it and it impacts our lives. And this is what we're seeing. So where do people find out more information about you guys? Jim?
Yeah, so that you can find us on the web at INRIX.com. The other place that you'll find out or you'll experience our traffic information on a daily basis. So Ford Cars with Sync, all the navigation and routing in there is powered by our traffic. If you buy a new Toyota vehicle that has Entune, which is their in-car infotainment system, we're also powering that as well. And then there's some great mobile navigation apps out there. MapQuest is one that we work with. We work with the Navigon guys on Mobile Navigator. MotionX GPS Drive also uses our traffic information. Those are all great resources for folks out there on the mobile phone. And then in the government sector, there's about 25 state DOTs today that are using our traffic as part of their operations and their planning purposes. So, and we're finding increasingly that's happening for us overseas in Europe too. We're actually going to be providing all the traffic information for England, probably starting in the June-July timeframe, probably right before the Olympics. So we're starting to work with the Highways Agency there for an entire country. So
right before the Olympics,
the value is there. Right before the Olympics, yeah, and that was an interesting thing. Is like we actually did a traffic forecast for the Olympic Games that we issued in January in London. That basically took a look at the events that were going on, similar events that had happened in those locations and venues in the past, and what we've seen happen when traffic tie-ups happen around those areas, and did a pretty good estimate of what people might expect on that opening weekend. And I think it's fair to say there might be some athletes moving a little bit faster on the track than cars will be moving on the roads around the greater city of London. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I love it. It's like the new Farmer's Almanac, but for traffic. That's what you guys are creating, right?
There you go.
Well, if there's anything that I've learned, first of all, go to INRIX.com. That's INRIX.com, or go to any of the app stores, app marketplaces that you can, and go and download the application if you want to test this out. I'd love your feedback. But I think that the thing that I've learned here out of all of this, Jim, I think that if you are a traffic reporter, start looking for a new job. You are outdated. You are done. Don't fly over with a helicopter anymore, because that is just a waste of gasoline and a waste of resources. You start using something like INRIX. Get out of that business. If your aspiration is to be a traffic reporter, stop. Go to school for something else. That's my advice to you. And my advice to you as an entrepreneur out there is start looking at this space. We are just at the beginning of it. Companies like INRIX are out there. These guys have that data. What can you do with that data to build next generation product? What can you do in the automobile that isn't just about apps and coupons or about even distributing entertainment? This is really where the crux of the issue is. Go out and find something that you can use this data for. There's so much potential here. And that's why I love having guys like Jim on here who can open this up to it and really showcase what mobile can do when it's kind of this massive network, the way that it should be done. So Jim, I really appreciate you coming on and talking for so long about this. As I said, I'm a numbers, I'm a stats junkie, I'm a big number junkie. So I love this conversation. Thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
I've been speaking with Jim Bach, who is the Director of Community Relations at INRIX. Go to INRIX.com, INRIX.com, and check it out. I really appreciate Jim coming on. I really appreciate you guys, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, participating in this, listening, whatever it is. I really appreciate it. I know you found a tremendous amount of value. Reach out to me at untether@gmail.com if you've got any comments, questions, suggestions, companies that you'd like on here. I love hearing feedback from you. This has been another episode of Untether.tv. We'll see you all later. Jim, thanks again. Really appreciate it.